Say, baby. Say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, say, baby. Say, baby. Say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby. Say, baby. Say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby. Say, baby.
All right, shut up, you little brats. All right, how's it going, party people? I am Useless Agent, and this is STS, which you should know that anyway. Welcome to the show. Today is February 6th, 2023. So far, we have gone nowhere in terms of progression. Now, if you were around to watch the show back, I believe when I first started the show, at least at the last episode of the year, I had made not a New Year's resolution, but kind of like a New Year's prediction. And my prediction was very, very wrong. I, for some reason, thought that this was going to be a new year and we were going to learn from our mistakes, not really our mistakes, but the mistakes of the powers that be and those that are in charge of our entertainment. I really thought this was going to be a year where they learned and knew that this, the MCU, the woke, the cancel culture, the inserted politics, the unnecessary sexualizations. I was hoping all of this was going to just chill. It's not. It's like as if God is Trump and he's just doubling down. So it's just really sad that I came up with that prediction, and I honestly, I won't even say it was more hope than prediction. It was a prediction. I really thought that this was going to happen, and it didn't. Okay, so yep, this is last day for Magic Melon. So tomorrow we'll have a new strain to be talking about. So everyone get out your lighter or your vape, whatever it is you do. Chris should be joining us soon. If that's not her watching, I don't know. But she should be with us momentarily. Ah, yes, I see you too. Ah, delicious. And I'm telling you, the mango taste on this is just unbelievable. Like I said before, back in the day when people were discovering that marijuana strains, the young kids in high school, when they were discovering new strains and they, basically were trying every damn strain just to say you tried it. People started lying about their actual buds, saying that this is blueberry, and it turned out it wasn't. It turned out it wasn't because what people would do was spray dro drops, and dro drops used to give you a little bit of flavor to your marijuana, but people would actually put this on the actual weed so it'd smell like blueberries. Again, no weed is going to smell like fresh blueberries. You may get that tiny little hint of a scent, but that's it. That's how you know your weed is real. So once I started noticing the weed started getting more dense Obviously, it's going to be more dense because it's carrying the weight of the drops itself, which is heavier than water. So, A, you're making it more dense. B, you're wetting it, so you're making it hard to smoke. And really, it just creates more resin. It starts clogging. I don't know if you've ever had a Dro Drop before, but these were very popular back in the early 2000s when even cigarettes were trying to come up with all sorts of different flavors. You had companies like Salem and Cools that were making all sorts of different types of cancer sticks, from the Camel Crushes that go from reds to menthol within just crushing the little thing. Um, Chris is saying, I remember smoking tropical camels. Right. I remember that there was a cigarette by Salem that came like a book of gum, the same kind of packaging that gum comes in. So it made you think that you were getting more cigarettes. And I actually counted it, and they actually gave you 15 instead of 20. So it was just pretty marketing, and it was totally marketing towards children. Now, the camel guy and the advertisements being taken off of major magazines and no longer being able to promote their product was sad enough, but saying that Joe Camel spoke to children, I mean, I grew up watching and liking Joe Camel. I even wore him on my shirts, and I would get in trouble at school because I'd be wearing a Bud Light shirt or a cigarette brand shirt, or I had one specific shirt that had let's just say it was two skeletons at a cemetery, and one was performing a oral act on the other, and it shows the skeleton but with long blonde hair, and it just says "Get a job," and I was suspended for 3 days for wearing that shirt. They marked it down to 1 day, but man, that was hilarious. So, those were the days, man. Those were the days. All right. I remember when they had those black and pink cigarettes as well. They literally marketed for 20-something-year-old girls. Those were literally the cigarettes that her clique would drink, were smoking at that time. And yeah, you cannot say that those were not geared towards younger kids, because back then you only had to be 18 to smoke. You didn't have to be 21. I didn't even think that was a real law until about 2021, I want to say. And someone asked me if I was 21, and I said, dude, these are cigarettes. And he's like, yeah, they changed the law. And Evanston was the first one to change the law before Chicago. So I thought it was simply an Evanston thing. I did not know that it was going to become the only age you can smoke in. I think that's still ridiculous. By 18, you're old enough to make your own decisions if you want to smoke cigarettes or not. And I think it sucks because when you were 18, you used to look forward to being 18 because you had all those extra freedoms. And so Christine is also saying, and everyone knows that 18-year-olds buy cigarettes for kids who are younger than them anyway. We always had that one friend. Yeah, that speaks volumes, because yes, we all did. We all had that one friend that would buy us cigarettes. For me, it was my friend Gabriel. He was the 18-year-old senior, so he would get our cigarettes for us. And yeah, it must be much harder now for a teenager, because now you have to wait for, the same hobo. And what we would always do is ask homeless guys to do it, because they have nothing to lose. They don't care. And they usually just want the change, And that was just weird. To raise the age, I thought was a little just uncalled for. But as you can see, that's not the topic. of today, oh shit, I don't even have the topic up right now. So, as you can see, the topic of today is Kevin Smith sucks. Now, why did I put that there? Well, the answer is pretty easy, and I can sum it up in one show. He-Man. All right. Kevin Smith was, to me, any guy that, I think any person that was 20 something when Clerks came out, it was just, it was like listening to the Beatles for the first time. It was something so different and great. And so we have now, I don't know, how have we come to this point? And the type of people we have become is by far the most mercurial thing about who we are as people in general. Who we are at 5, 10 years old to the events that change us forever. And for one man in New Jersey, he went from being the chubby, nerdy kid with a great imaginative mind that will grow with age and become a creator that will inspire a generation of comic nerds, movie buffs, geeks, stoners, and unite these elitist, sarcastic, overqualified 20 somethings and, uh, you know, the mundane society that's forced upon us like a vicarious living parent. Kevin Smith in 94 created something so different yet so familiar, it needed no other introduction or explanation besides its very title, Clerks. Clerks was it was a movement. It was understanding the mind of a 20 something in the mid 90s and the struggle of all the things that come with being in your 20s. It was a huge step in the right direction for film as a whole, or it was a great reflection on a generation that was like no generation before it. This came with a bitter duo trapped in the realm of reality trapped in the realm of mediocrity, and their journey through adulthood and introduction into a world void of color and excitement, but instead a future of repetitional adequacy summed up in one day of chaotic disproportion. That is what Clerks was. The cast consisted of identifiable 20 somethings being exactly what they are, 20 somethings, still unsure of where they're going in life. It was a story of humor, friendship, growth, acceptance, and the modernization of American culture. Some of the most universal lessons that anyone could learn from and ask for. Following this film, which was not just a cult classic, but a movie that everyone had to see, and if you were in that particular age range or if you simply were around at that time, you had to see Clerks. You wanted to know what everyone was talking about. And the next film he did, Mallrats, once again immediately hit cult classic, and once again showing the life of like-minded individuals that anyone around that age group from 14 to 40 could totally relate to, especially when it came down to the esoteric subjects like comics, superheroes, movies, and television trivialities that would not be very important for the next 20 years. The conversations, again, were poised, well worded, yet ridiculous in nature, and said with such a great cadence of an average college student, too smart for his own good, but too dumb for the real world. Smith could have relied on those two movies and banked on that and been rich for the rest of his life. Smith could have relied on these types of characters alone, but these movies still would have been successful. But he added the most beloved and most well-known duo since Beavis and Butthead and Bill and Ted. He gave us a known duo that, from their very outfits, started becoming borderline costumes, and the attitude so off the wall that their names became more famous than the very movies that they were in. Jay and Silent Bob, a duo that was so bankable. Kevin Smith used them in several other movies and installments. Hell, even in cartoon fashion, they were hilarious. And they were never stripped of that attitude that they had. So for the next decade and a half, this was the man. Kevin Smith was the king of nerds. He was the magi, the captain of the Comic Con. I was fortunate enough to have gone to the Chicago Theater and saw one of his occasional tours that he would do. It was called An Evening with Kevin Smith. And I'll be the first to say that I had a great time. The show was not sold out, and there was plenty of seats in the front. So he actually allowed us to bypass security from the balcony to come down to the more expensive seats and sit wherever we wanted. And it was great because the security had to ease up. The show was, not too big. So, um, yeah, he literally told the security to ease up and let the people pass. He even managed to get two people to raise their hand and date. He basically set a guy up. He saw a guy that was alone, and for the next hour, he rejoiced us in these awesome stories about people he had the honor to work with, and all these, stories about who was impossible to work with, and even got this guy that was by himself and had mentioned he had no date. He asked, can you stand up? The guy stood up. He got someone else. He just said, hey, would anyone want to go out with this guy right now? And a girl actually cheered. And so he had her come over, and the guy got a date. So that showed just how awesome he was as a person. And so he had spoken about Clerks 2. He even apologized for it not living up to the hype. And everything about him seemed so genuine. He, he said that he looked at Clerks as a way to express the decades of life from being in your 20s. So Clerks 2 is about being in your 30s. And then he wanted to keep moving up to 40s and 50s and so on until it wasn't fun anymore. And that's literally what he said. 15 years later, Kevin has now gone from the heavyset guy that took no prisoners, wrote dialogue that mocked the corporate shill shit machine that Hollywood churns out year after year, and the very same scrawny, rich, backward ass moron is no longer listening to the people that made him. Instead, he's following the exact same formula that he once made fun of and despised. So I really wish there was a chance that we can show these movies that he now creates, and post 2010, and show that to the very man in the backwards hat that could fill a damn trench coat. Show him those movies. How would a 25-year-old Kevin Smith react to the modern day of television and film? Pretty sure he would write about how much he despised it. And I find it extremely difficult to believe that even for a moment that this guy that created comic purists like Brody from Mallrats and Star Wars fanatics like Randall and Clerks. So do you really think that these guys would enjoy She-Hulk or Captain Marvel Hell, I'm pretty sure Jay and his hetero life mate would not be very keen on the idea of gender swapping Thor, the god of fucking lightning, or being able to stomach a single episode of Velma. This is the man that is claiming now that the fans speak against this new world, this new woke culture, cancel culture. He thinks that we're a small minority, which he used to be a part of. Kevin was given the IP and the keys to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, instead with the title He-Man Beyond, and he followed the exact same predictable bait and switch formula that is so used so heavily, mainly in like Marvel shows like Hawkeye, Loki, Thor, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, giving the audience the expectation of seeing their favorite superheroes only to be subverted and give us something that nobody asked for. We wanted to see Loki. We didn't care about the female Loki. She wasn't why we watched the show. So why didn't you just call it Cersei or whatever her name was? And they did this with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They did this with Hawkeye. They did it with the new Thor movie, giving the audience this expectation and then completely bastardizing it. You know, the very fact that our former leader, Kevin Smith, copped out and literally blamed the fans for not liking it was not just an insult to the IP of He-Man, but it was an insult to us that grew up inspired by this man's art, the dark humor, the realistic dialogue. In my opinion, he lost all of that once he made Die Hard. He talked about how he hated these superstars and always sided with the fans, and that the cheapest excuse is to fan blame. Now he's literally blaming the fans and the prima donnas in the business, yet he's literally become a carbon copy of everything that he once stood against. And that breaks my heart because I too was inspired by Kevin Smith's work. I loved Mallrats, Clerks, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. You know, it was up to Clerks 2 that I stopped, you know. And I didn't even bother to see Clerks 3 because it was so just predictable. And so far, when I ask a friend about it, they'll tell me exactly what I already figured out from the previews. So, Kevin Smith, RIP, you will be missed. And, you know, God, I wish we can get our old Kevin Smith back. Chris has something to say. People like him always seem to turn into what they hate. Money corrupts. Once you have so much money, all you think about is more money. And yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, industry kills the artist. And music is and film is an industry, but it's also art. So when you try to say that art is not industry, there is a flaw to that. And there's a hole in that kind of thinking. I did this once. I used to say music is an art, not an industry. And then my friend's mother had called me out on that and said, okay, but if Picasso sells his paintings, it has now become, you know, consumerism, and therefore later on becomes an industry. So without the industry, the artist couldn't make any money. So I understand there's holes in that, but it's really more meant as a theoretical saying more than, yeah, it's more theoretical because, you know, everything works in theory, and, you know, so many things can work on paper, but in reality, it just doesn't work. Capitalism works on paper, but we live this life and we can see that it does not work. The monetary system seemed to make sense on paper, but we live it and it doesn't work. All right. And so I just feel like we have lost such a great mind when it came down to being the voice of the little guy, guys like exactly like Brody and Randall and Dante and Jay and Silent Bob. These were anti-establishment characters, but at least we'll always have that to look back to, rather than rather than to be excited for anything coming up in the future, because I just don't see it anymore. I don't see Kevin Smith coming back ever, with what he used to be. He may come up with something that surprises me. I really hope to be proven wrong. Again, whenever I say these things, these predictions about directors, actors, musicians, I don't want this for them. I want to be proven wrong. So, Kevin, please prove me wrong. All right. That is my time. Thanks a lot for joining me. Love you guys. Take care of each other. And as always, I will see you on the other side. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. We'll have a whole new idea. All right. Stay cheesy, my friends.
Do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, do you wanna lay down by my side? Baby, do you wanna lay down with me? Say, baby, say, baby, say, baby, say, baby, say, baby, do you wanna lay down with me?